it's easy to get into a trap of just working hard and working hard in the wrong things.
When we realize that we can attract through who we're being, it takes a lot of the stress out of it.
And that's it, really. That's the only sort of solutions that we have, is just to put more effort into it rather than being strategic.
Hello, Architect Nation. Welcome back. This is the right place if you run an architectural practice. On today's episode, you'll discover the hidden trap that keeps most architects stuck and grinding harder, yet never feeling caught up with all those administrative to-dos. Why saying yes to more projects actually may be harming you and shrinking your profits, and what to do instead that the most successful architectural practices do. And the counterintuitive, little-known shift that lets you attract clients' opportunities and results without burning yourself out. Yes, that's true. Now, first, a word from today's sponsors.
Today's episode is sponsored by Gelt. Is your architecture firm just filing taxes or actually using them to grow the business? Gelt is your partner in optimizing your taxes so you can focus on scale. They work with you year-round, not just at tax time, taking a proactive approach that combines expert CPAs and powerful technology. From smart entity structures to overlooked deductions and smarter compensation planning, Gelt helps architecture firms unlock strategies most accountants miss. And exclusively for Business of Architecture listeners, Gelt is offering 10% off your first year. Don't wait for next tax season. Schedule your complimentary consultation at joingelt.com. That's JOINGELT.com to learn more and mention BOA when you sign up. A while ago, we began to hear reports of a company that was helping some of our clients build remote teams. We looked into it more closely and discovered the company World Teams that was helping small architectural practitioners build remote teams that were both capable and qualified. We were intrigued by another business that are addressing one of the critical pain points for small architectural practices, which is the ability to grow and shrink a team effectively, to be able to handle higher workflow without having to staff up significantly, and also being very sensitive about labor cost. World Teams is built to address these issues. World Teams is a small but mighty company that helps architectural practices build high-performing remote teams quickly and efficiently, saving you the headache of sorting resumes and interviewing underqualified candidates. World Teams operates in your time zone and prioritizes near-native English speakers, ensuring clear and efficient communication with your remote team members. They have flexible contracts so you can adjust your team size as your needs evolve. Additionally, you're connected directly with your skilled professionals, which fosters trust and collaboration, and World Teams helps you reduce your operating cost without compromising the quality that's so important to a practice. To download a free guide for building a remote team for a small architectural practice, go to businessofarchitecture.com/World Teams. That's one word, businessofarchitecture.com/World Teams. As a reminder, sponsorship is not an endorsement, and you must do your own due diligence before entering into any business relationship. Go to businessofarchitecture.com/World Teams.
Today, I'm joined by Business of Architecture Principal Ryan Willard. Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you, sir. How are you?
Doing well. Ryan, as a citizen of the world, where are you located today in your world globetrotting travels?
La Ciudad de Mexico.
Oh, very nice. Mexico City.
Yeah.
Mexico City.
My first time in Mexico. And this is one of those cities where when we mentioned it to clients and architects in general, it has a reputation of being somewhere very rich with culture and architecture and history and food and everything. And it's kind of flying over the city. It's a city. It's one of the.
It really is.
It's huge. It is huge. It's this big sprawling mass, and it's just, like a rich tapestry of loads of stuff happening. And it's got world-class skyscrapers and architectures and amenities, and then it's got ancient civilization. It's got civilizational things that are older than the colonialists, older than a lot of stuff in Europe. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, Mexico City, the side of Mexico City, didn't that used to be the head of the Aztec Empire?
I believe so, yeah.
Should we think about that?
I don't know.
If I remember correctly, isn't it built on, originally it was built on a lake bed where everything was actually, they had like pilings down in the water, and this Aztec city just kind of floated on top, or maybe was constructed on top of the lake.
Yeah, amazing.
Today we're going to talk about the hustle and grind culture, and having been someone myself who's traveled in Latin America a lot, it seems like the hustle and grind culture, it's sort of like being in a Latin American city where there's motorcycles rushing past, cars are honking, people yelling. It's just like this constant commotion and hubbub. So let's have a chat about hustle and grind culture. We're going to talk about a different approach for getting out of the hustle and grind culture and why that is so important as an architectural practice owner. So when we say hustle and grind culture, Ryan, for you, what does that actually mean?
For me, it means just the constant busyness. And we see a lot of architecture firms that are, let's say, that they're putting in, they're not lazy, right? Architects, you can't say that about a lot of architects in general. They're not lazy people. They put in a lot of energy, they put in a lot of work, they try hard, they have high aspiration, they have high quality controls, they want to do good work, they want to serve their clients really, really well. And it's easy to get into a trap of just working hard and working hard in the wrong things. So we could make a distinction here about working hard in the things that lead to more hard work as opposed to working hard in the things that lead to no hard work. And certainly the hustle and grind culture would be the stuff that leads to working hard leading to more hard work. And that's not what we want to do as business owners. This is a mindset shift as well.
For me, hustle and grind culture includes that, and also the word culture is what I want to focus on, Ryan, which is it's one thing to hustle and grind, but the idea of culture means that there's some sort of overarching thread or pressure to be in this hustle and grind culture. And let's unravel that. Let's go back. So a hustle and grind culture is, like Ryan said, it's where we're constantly pushing to try to achieve something. We have the core belief that if we just work harder, that's what it's going to take to get results. And I can tell you from personal experience, this is an exhausting way to run a business because we only have so much time in the day. We only have so much energy. I don't know, Ryan, you've probably never been exhausted or dealt with hustle and grinding.
Never. This all just happened very, very easy. I just imagined it and it happened.
Yeah, I would imagine. For me, I want to say it started back in architecture school, but for me, it even goes back even before that because I was raised in a culture of hustle and grind. Growing up as a child, for me, we had chores. We had this chore wheel that my mom would have us do. So we had a large house. Every kid had their chore. And I just remember at a very young age, my mom instilled in me this work ethic of work hard. And then, of course, through school, it was all about doing, it was all about getting the homework done in time. And then that got compounded when I was in architecture school with these crits that we'd have to do. And I remember staying up very late. Every architect listening to this podcast could probably tell lots of stories about being in architecture school. And one of the challenges of it being a creative profession is you never get to the point where the problem is done. Unlike maybe mathematics or an English essay or something of the sort, with architecture, you can continue tweaking that beautiful piece of art indefinitely. And so I remember many mornings sitting in Rand Hall at Cornell University, watching the sun come up through the eastern windows as I'd been there all night long, more than I'd like to admit. That didn't happen at the Bartlett, did it, Ryan?
They had to put a curfew in place at the Bartlett when I was there in maybe my third year, where it was in my diploma, my master's. They put a curfew in where you weren't allowed to stay past 10 o'clock and you weren't allowed to come in earlier than 6 or something like that. And what students used to do, because they were so, what's the word? I might have been guilty of doing this as well, is when the security guard used to come around to check that there were no students in, people used to hide under their desks so that they'd turn all the lights up and the security guard would come in and then he'd disappear and lock up. And then you're like, great, okay, we can carry on working all through the night.
The party continues.
But it was a terrible, and it's very similar to you. My upbringing was not perhaps so much like having to do chores and things at home, but it was stressed upon us that hard work and work, particularly at school, was the priority, and attainment of grades and the effort that is needed to do that is very, that's what the purpose is. You have to go put in lots of energy, and then your schooling system that we're brought up in is very, it's about you and your results. So anything, it's not about accomplishing something as a group or a team. None of that doesn't happen. And I appreciate there's reasons why, and why the pedagogy might exist where you're kind of focused on an individual, et cetera, et cetera. There are kind of more enlightened forms of schooling around the world, but that's another conversation. But the focus was very much on you and your results, and asking for help or getting someone else to do your work is called cheating. So you've got to do your work, and then obviously university is very much the same, where you start getting other people to do your work, then that's not really what you should be doing. It's either plagiarism or it's cheating, or there needs to be some sort of agreement in place with tutors if you're going to have other people doing your drafting. And all of this leads to a very blinkered view of getting stuff done. Because we're just being trained then to believe that if the more energy and effort I put into something, then that's where I get my results. Our whole school system is based on this, right? You get results based on that hard work, as opposed to doing something together. This is why I think sports and music is really, really good things to do as a kid, because you start to learn to operate as a team and it's not so individualistic.
Yeah, problem number one when we look at the hustle and grind culture is it saps your energy and robs your relationships. So simply, when we talk about hustle and grind, let's define what that is. I'll talk about, I remember even when I was starting this business of architecture, back in, it would have been 2012, 2013. I had full-time employment at the time, and I remember getting up at like 4:30 in the morning because I was so passionate about the business side of architecture. So I'd get up early and I would write blog posts, and eventually I would produce podcast episodes. And there was a certain amount of fire. There was a certain amount of passion that fueled that. And there's definitely a stage that we go through where it seems like, from my perspective, that this hustle and grind is necessary because we need to learn through our own experience. There's no way around it. When you start an architectural practice, you're going to have to work hard. Now, there's a distinction between working hard and hustle and grind in my mind. And the distinction is this: working hard simply means doing something dedicated, focused, concentrating. Whereas hustle and grind is more about feeling harried all the time, feeling like you're never completing all those to-dos, feeling like there's a never-ending to-do list, like there's a constant pressure, never being able to really feel at ease. And that has impacts. It has impacts on relationships that we have in terms of not being around when family members perhaps need us or want us. It has impacts on our nervous systems, causing dis-ease, causing our bodies to weaken our immune systems because we're not getting enough sleep. Maybe we're getting up in the morning. So the impacts of this culture is profound. And again, it's a culture. It's not just a thing that we go through. A lot of times it feels like we have to earn our stripes through this hustle and grind culture. I'm curious, Ryan, have you ever said with pride when someone asks you how you're doing, yeah, I'm very busy? How are things going? Oh, just so busy.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether it was being a student in architecture school, I was probably more interested in looking busy than actually being productive.
No, you don't, Ryan.
And that was a kind of trap in and of itself. They used to have a joke at university of the first thing that they do when they examine your portfolio is to weigh it.
Did a couple of extra drawings in there, huh? Just well, it's like what is it? It's like when I used to do the English papers in school. They tell you to double space them. I'd put a couple extra spaces in there, kind of bump the font up as large
Puffs
as
it
I
out a
possibly
little bit.
could. Oh yeah, start out with a 1-page paper. And by the time you put those spaces in there, by the time you bump up the font a little bit, and then of course you got to increase the margins, so all the margins come in. You have like a 10-page essay. So how did
Yeah.
that work with the architecture? How did that work with drawings? What do you mean you would have copious amounts of work to
Yeah, I
show?
mean, obviously it was a kind of they're looking, they were kind of making a point that they are looking for a certain volume of work, and then for most of us as young students, you don't really know how to effectively produce that volume of work, and so you get into this kind of very inconsistent performance where a lot of work gets, 80% of the work gets done in the last 20% of the time that you had available to do it. And that can kind of prompt all these all-nighters and this kind of very unhealthy kind of swing culture. And it's very difficult. And and in all the time that you're kind of leading up to that, there's a lot of spinning your wheels and doing things again. And like in architecture, you go off on the wrong tangent, and then you can become too attached to the results of it. And I noticed this a lot when I was teaching in a design unit. You have kids that have the and I had this as well, the blank paper syndrome, where they'd come in with the blank piece of paper week after week after week, and then they've had all-nighters and they've been working really hard, and you're like, well, what on what? What have you been doing? And it's like, this is like barely any work, and they're convinced of themselves that they've been doing a lot of hard work, but really what they've been doing is stressing a lot about what it was that they were supposed to be doing. And then there were the other students. I noticed some of the most successful students I saw at the Bartlett, for example, they just kept normal hours. And often they were a bit more mature. That was the other thing. But they would come in at the same time every day, and then they would leave. Sometimes they might work a Saturday afternoon or a Saturday morning. But it was just a much more sort of consistent, leveled. They weren't trying so hard, it appeared.
Yeah, absolutely. I've noticed that as well, that I've seen this, that the amount of time it takes to do a task oftentimes will grow to the amount of time allotted.
Yeah, exactly. Parkinson's law.
There you go. Right? So if the project is due the next day, it's that last 20%. I'm going to cram it, going to make sure it gets all done. And look, that happens in architectural practices too. It's not any surprise there. We were talking when we were just in Austin, Ryan, had the opportunity. You were speaking at the AI design conference, was great. How did that talk go, by the way?
Oh, it went very well, thank you. It was a lovely venue. The library in Austin, the Lake Flato building, is pretty cool. And it was good to meet with some past clients. An old friend of mine who I went to the Bartlett with, she's now the AIA Austin president-elect. So she was the one that had invited me along to talk about. So that was really lovely to reconnect there. And it was great to meet some other architects and just hear what they're dealing with, hear some of their pains and problems. And one of the things that we were talking about there, the talk was about high performance teams. And this kind of conversation came up of just the constant grind and how practice owners often they become the bottleneck for everything in the business. Like they want to have the final say, they want to have the decision, they want to be the one that kind of has their sticky little hands on every little last piece of it, right? And this is very much a hangover from how we've been working at university, and it just means that then the team become very disempowered, because now they're always second guessing what you want to do, or they don't, and it's just easier for them to come and ask you because they know that you're going to give them the direction, and they switch half their brain off, and it doesn't work for anybody. And all it does is perpetuate the illusion of like we're all working really, really hard. But that was that was the nature of the talk. It was good.
And how was the response? What did people say? People come up to you afterwards. What was the response to that?
It struck a chord with some people, and there was a few practice owners that. And it was what was really nice actually was that it was a very broad spread of practice owners that I ended up speaking to afterwards. From smaller micro practices, your kind of 3-4 person practices, to one person I was talking to, same sorts of problems, but in a 650 person firm that had 13 offices across the state. And then they were kind of sharing with me the amount of profit that they think that they're leaving on the table as a result of this kind of like, we're working really hard, but it's, we seem to be leaving a lot of stuff on the table, and we're working very hard in different directions. So that's kind of what becomes interesting, this hustle and grind culture. We kind of identify with it. We wear it like a badge of honor. We want to be perceived as being busy. I remember at RSHP, there were certain kind of directors there that no matter what you asked them, they would always say, I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy. And then, of course, I'd pick up the same sort of thing and just try and make sure that I look like I'm busy, because it was some sort of, I must be important if I'm busy.
There's a lot that goes into it. So problem number 2 here that we have, Rion, is sometimes we only have one tool in our arsenal to get results. That is, work harder, do more.
And again, this is what we've just been talking about, right? That when we're faced with any kind of problem in our architecture practice, like the problem of making more money, well, what am I going to do? Our thinking around it is like, well, I've just got to, either I got to do my work faster so that I can get more of it out of the door and I can bill more, or we win more projects so I can just do more of that and we work harder at getting all those projects done. And that's it, really. That's the only sort of solutions that we have, is just to put more effort into it. Okay, rather than being strategic and kind of thinking about a different context. Sometimes, I'll give you an example. We'll have clients and they'll start by their initial reaction to kind of earning more money is like, let's just put more energy into it. And we've got to be careful of this working hard attitude on things that are going to produce more hard work, as opposed to working hard on things that are going to eliminate us having to work so hard, right? I.e., this is the kind of shift between building an asset or like investing in something. I want to invest my hard work into something that's going to kind of come back and compound over time. And I want to just be putting hard work into something that just keeps demanding more and more hard work from me. That can't be, it's just exhausting. And so an example of that might be a client wants to grow their practice. They start working harder. They start saying yes to more stuff, start bringing on more work, but they're doing it all the same way that they've always done it. They're just now trying to work hard. And now they've gone, rather than doing 40 hours, and now they're doing 60 hours a week. Okay, great. We're billing a little bit more because we're doing 60 hours more work. But that's exhausting. It's exhausting. And normally what happens is something pops, or it's just not sustainable. And then it just drops in the opposite direction. And so now we start getting these wild swings, as opposed to putting some energy into a different strategy, or taking some time to identify what's the 20% of the projects in my firm that have brought in 80% of the revenue. Oh, that's an interesting trend to recognize. It's all these sorts of private developers who are kind of aspirational and are working on these gap sites. Okay, that's good. Those projects were asymmetric in their return. Or sometimes we notice people, there's different geographic locations that become much more profitable, and so they start saying no to other projects that are burning them out, and start being strategic about what they say yes to. So that's the kind of counterintuitive move. Like, you start saying no to stuff, and actually it gives you the opportunity to say yes to something that is more of a fit, and you've already defined what that fit is. So again, it's asymmetric in the amount of effort that you put in terms of, but the reward of it is, it's big. It can be really, really big.
And it's important to note here that there's nothing inherently wrong with the hustle and grind culture. As a matter of fact, it's very, very beautiful that we have this idea of hustling and grinding, working hard, stretching, pushing ourselves. If you watch any of David Goggins videos on social media. David Goggins is apparently the king of hustling and grinding. He's like, "You tired? Keep working. You want to give up? Push harder. I get up at 4 a.m. every morning and run 20 miles. What are you all doing?" So that's admirable. I mean, that's great. It's great for David Goggins. And certainly we can go through stages where we need to hustle and grind more than at other times. I was talking with the firm owner last week we were talking with Frank and Megan Lynn, and they have a very, very successful design practice based out of Austin, Texas. As a matter of fact, we had the opportunity to go into one of their beautiful homes that it was incredible. Yeah, beautiful, Austin's finest. Absolutely incredible. And it was interesting because they had like most dedicated designers, they had put a lot of sweat equity, hustle and grinding, we'd call it, into building up the practice and getting to where getting the kind of products they're working on now. And many firm owners end up continuing that, we've seen, throughout their entire career. But Megan and Frank, they reached out because they felt like there was something inside of them. They felt like, you know what? I want to graduate from hustling and grinding. So that's the way I like to look at it, is that you can, if you want to, graduate from hustling and grinding. You don't need to. It's an opportunity, not a must. So the culture that we want to talk about is a different culture. It's the culture of freedom and ease. Now let's talk about, Ryan, what does the culture of freedom and ease look like as compared with the culture of hustle and grind?
And I might make a distinction here. I've been reading this book by a guy called it's David Haskins on power versus force, and he kind of makes this distinction between the two forms of effort, if you like, and force. And we can think about this in a kind of forceful culture. Force relies on us kind of coercing people into doing things, or manipulating or putting pressure onto a situation or people or something to try and squeeze out an outcome from it. Okay. And it works by kind of pushing against resistance. And this is where it's often quite short-lived because, if you look at Newton's laws, second law of force, every force has its opposite and equal, pushback, if you like. That's what happens. We end up kind of meeting an opposition when we're trying to force things. And force as well often comes from a kind of ego-driven motive like fear or pride or anger or wanting something a lot. And, we might think about trying to get a result through forcing someone to comply with your wants or needs through a threat or through leverage. Okay, so you might have a culture in your business where you're getting people to stay late because there's intimidation involved, or there's a subtext of, you might not keep your job if you don't stick around. That's, I'm not saying that doesn't produce results, because it has its place, but
Certainly. Yep.
it has limitations. It has a lot more limitations. So this idea of freedom and ease would be more in kind of tune with David Haskins' ideas on power, where power flows from truth and integrity and alignment with your values and universal principles. Honesty, integrity, compassion, connection, love, these kind of higher principles and ideas, that power actually flows from them and leading from there and kind of focusing on like creating that as the environment. Okay, like stuff starts to happen much more freely and without force and effort. Another metaphor that I like to kind of think of sometimes is the idea of catching butterflies. And there are people, and butterflies can be a metaphor for money or for attainment or something. But if you imagine somebody catching butterflies with a net, and they want to catch more butterflies, so what do? They get a bigger net, and then they get up earlier in the morning, and then they flail around more, just endlessly. They put in more energy in trying to catch these butterflies, but they end up getting exhausted. Whereas on the power side, the freedom and ease side, there are people who build a garden, and they take the time to build the garden. They know which plants attract the butterflies. They know how to arrange it. They know how to take advantage of the forces of the sun. They know how to situate the garden, and they know how to cultivate and nurture an environment where the butterflies just want to come. And then you can imagine this idea of somebody sitting in their garden and it's just teeming with butterflies. So power doesn't require this kind of force or coercion. It naturally attracts cooperation, and it's sustainable because it's rooted in, let's say, a higher consciousness, or it's rooted in goodwill, or it's rooted in us going beyond our egoistic desires and structure. It's something that we're feeling deeply connected with the whole. Like good leaders have humility to them. Like they're willing to do the work around their ego and put it aside. It's not easy. It's not easy work, but it can produce much more kind of abundant results. And again, it comes from these higher principles: love, compassion, and service. So on the freedom and ease, imagine you inspiring somebody with your vision, you moving and connecting with them in a way that they want to put in some energy. They want to kind of create results. You give them autonomy, you give them ownership, they take responsibility, and they start doing these things on their own accord without you having to coerce, manipulate, cajole. So the environment of freedom and ease is much more like a space that you're creating through the way that you're being and the energy that you're bringing. And there's an element of like letting go, of stepping out of the way, and kind of allowing this thing to happen.
100%. Remember I told you about my meeting with Alex last week? Did I mention?
Yeah, tell us.
I
Tell
had
us.
this great conversation with him.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's a multiple 7-figure entrepreneur. He's run multiple businesses. Now he's 55 years old and 55 years young, I'd rather say, and retired, just looking for his next thing. Really, really smart guy. And he said something that one of his mentors told him. He said, "The universe rewards surrender." And I thought that was such a beautiful concept. And it made me think of the conversation, Ryan, that we've been having, where when I looked back at the really pivotal points in my life, the big needle movers, the things that boosted my income dramatically, brought relationships into my life, expanded my network, like really had a massive impact on me. They were all things that I didn't necessarily seek out. They were things that sort of just happened, that came to me. For instance, when I met my wife, of course I was scouting. I was looking to get married, but I didn't go to a bar. I wasn't actively searching for someone. I just bumped into her one day and didn't see her again for another 6 or 7 months. And then when she saw me, we kind of hit it off again. But it wasn't like I was in the space of trying to really hustle and grind to find my partner. And likewise, when you came into my life, Ryan, I think you had sent me, maybe was it a LinkedIn message? Yeah, so I was at the stage, and the funny part is I was in the stage of my business where I was thinking, you know what, this is fun, but I really would like to do it with other people. It'd be a lot more fun to do it with other smart, intelligent people. And I mean, was I hustling and grinding? Yes, I was doing a bit of that on my own. I was producing podcast episodes, producing a lot of content here around business of architecture, but I wasn't actively looking for a business partner or an associate or a transformational leader to come on board of our company. And so that it kind of blows my mind. It seems like I'm hearing your analogy of this butterfly garden, and I'm seeing that pattern played out in my life. Like each of these instances, when I met my wife, it was like I created the ideal conditions for my wife to show up in my life. She showed up, we ended up getting married, we have 6 children. Same thing with our partnership. I created the conditions that attracted you like a butterfly, and then I caught you with a net. And here we are in this beautiful arboretum just floating around with all of our wonderful clients. And this is good news, because when we realize that we can attract through who we're being, it takes a lot of the stress out of it because it just gets very, very hard to try to hustle and grind our way to success. I was mentioning, last week at this event I went to, and this is another great example maybe we can talk about of going with the flow and the opposite of hustle and grind. But there was a leader. I was at a transformational workshop, and I was telling this leader about this insight in my life where I'd suddenly realized that a lot of the wonderful things that happened to me were things that came without me directly looking for them or trying to create them in my life. And he said, that's because that's who you were being. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, if you put yourself into a state of abundance, if you put yourself into a state of focus on what you want, but release attachment to getting those things. In other words, yes, I have desires, but how and when they come to me is not of importance to me. I'm going to live it as if I already have those things. When I'm being that person inside, when I get up, when I already have the feelings, the emotions, as if I already had those things, is already in my life, then the things end up showing up.
Mm. It's powerful. It really resonates with me as well. I'm just thinking as we're talking here about the idea of power versus force and how often power comes as a result of letting go of something or clearing something out or removing an obstacle, as opposed to, it's not because it's not like you generate power necessarily. Like you can't force power into your life, but often the power is already there. Like it's just there, right? You're the will of the universe, attraction, God, whatever words you want to use, your higher self. Like that power is there already, and it's more about removing whatever's in the way for you to access it. And so I'm thinking just meeting my wife and kind of what was happening leading up to that, and I think there was a relationship that didn't work out the way that I'd wanted it to, and there was a kind of unrequited, I was probably more interested than the lady was, and there was a lot of kind of like energy and the sort of like and then there was a point of just like letting go of that. I remember kind of completely letting go of like what am I wasting so much energy on that, and then all of a sudden, all these people just started showing up without me doing anything or pursuing it. One of them being Yvonne. And again, our first interactions, there wasn't necessarily a pursuit. It was just allowing it to.
Yeah, I love that story, Ryan. I don't know if you've told it here on the podcast. How did you first meet Yvonne?
So I was we like to call it an art gallery to make it sound more classy and sophisticated.
That sounds pretty classy.
But it was
Art
more
gallery sounds pretty bouge.
It was more like an open studio for a load of artists up in Manor House in North London, which a cool sort of event. And I was there. I was standing in the queue to the toilet, and Yvonne was standing in front of me. And then there was this might be a good example of power versus force as well. There was a guy who was talking to her in the queue, and I was listening to the story. And he had a Ferrari parked outside, and he was there. He was kind of like courting the artist, going to buy some art or whatever. And he was kind of showing off and telling Yvonne about his Ferrari, and do you want to come outside and see it? And I was listening to it going, oh man, he's trying really
Ouch,
hard
that sounds
here to do
painful.
this.
Oh yes.
And Yvonne wasn't particularly interested, and she kind of challenged him a little bit on some of his knowledge about engines and cars. And then he kind of quieted down and just didn't, it just sort of petered out. And at that point, I kind of watched the interaction, and as we were queuing up for the loo, and there was only one loo in this entire place. And I jokingly said to her, oh, I really hope that the lady in there doesn't take too long, because, we've been out here for quite a while. And Yvonne sort of turns around and says yes. And I said, I reckon that lady in there's probably had something dodgy at lunch, because we've been waiting here for ages. And Yvonne's kind of like, yeah. And then I said, and I'm worried about you, because you look like you really need to go. You've been standing here for ages and you're doing a little jig. And Yvonne's like, what the hell? And then I took the joke further, and there was a mannequin in the queue next to us with a big cloak, and I pulled the cloak off and I said, here, if we need to, you can go underneath this cloak, and I've got a cup here that you can use. At which point, the whole queue of the people were laughing, and she was laughing. And fortunately, she didn't take it as some sort of. She didn't take it the wrong way, and the joke landed as intended. But that was it. That was how we first met, and we we eventually went to the loo, and then afterwards I just walked off, and I was waiting I was at a one of the artworks, and then Yvonne came up and saddled next to me, and I was like, there we go. But it was she'll be like, oh, he's telling that story again. But again, there wasn't necessarily force involved. I wasn't trying hard, which created the attraction. That was always the kind of,
always in the back of your mind.
That was always the status quo, as being in your 20s. But
I mean, I guess so.
But
I guess so.
It wasn't like, it wasn't like I've got to find a wife, I've got to find a girlfriend, I've got to find somebody. That wasn't there. It was like just fun, open.
Yeah.
And I'm having a good time. I don't need anything. That was the difference. I remember kind of the previous sort of relationship where it was like too much effort, too much pursuit, and then it wasn't working.
It reminds me, Tony Robbins always gave this example that I thought was really profound. He said, the way the human reticular activating system works, it doesn't understand negatives. So there's a part of the human psyche that doesn't understand no. Because the mind is a visual computer. So the mind sees images, and it doesn't understand the negative of an image. So if you showed an image and you tell it no, like don't go for this, all the mind sees is the image. It sees go for this.
Mm-hmm.
And he gives the example of oftentimes people when they're on a country road, and I've heard of this happening, and it's almost happened to me. They're drunk. I wasn't drunk. They fall asleep, and they veer off the side of the road. They open their eyes the last split second, and all they can see is the telephone pole right in front of them. And instead of dodging it, they steer right towards it. I mean, I found this happening in other situations. Maybe I'm on a bike and I run into some person or something, or I'm snowboarding and I'm trying to avoid a little divot in the hill, and I end up going right over it, right? Because what I'm focusing on, that's where I go. And so oftentimes if we're trying to escape something in business or our practice, I don't want to work on these low-cost projects anymore. I hate it when clients tell me that I'm too expensive, and we're trying to always say, I don't want this, I don't want that. Then these things end up coming to us, because the universe, as another friend of mine told me once, she said, the universe is an attraction-based universe, not an assertion-based universe.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was quite profound.
Because
there's so much. Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, I was gonna kind of share a similar sort of story of attracting things that you don't want. The other day when I was in Paris, we were trying to get a cab somewhere, and I used Uber, and for whatever reason there were some blocked roads, and the Uber person didn't show up, or they cancelled it, and we'd been waiting there for 15 minutes already, and then they never came, and then I had an appointment that I wanted to get to that was very important, and I really, I was very attached to not being late. Really, really attached to not being late. And I'd made a big scene about we're going to leave early and we're going to get there on time. And Yvonne and I would off we went. And this Uber driver didn't show up. And I got annoyed, right? Positively irritated that this Uber didn't show up. So then I started to try and hail a cab down in the street. And the more and more that I was trying to hail a cab down, I was getting more irritated, and the more repellent I was becoming to finding a cab. And we ended up having to walk for like another 20 minutes here, trying to get a cab. Eventually there was one cab, and we kind of walked into it, and now I'm really like pissed off of this whole situation, and we're going to be late, and we're having to ring the restaurant or whatever it was we were going to. And in the cab, we suddenly got hit with like loads of traffic. So the cab was meant to be the quick way to get there, and all of a sudden we've got into a cab and we're going in a particular direction, and it's just solid traffic. So kind of, again, the frustration, the annoyance. I'm going to get out. We're going to leave this cab and we're going to go and take the metro instead. And of course, as soon as like that decision, and again, it's this horrible sort of frustrated energy, and I wanted to get out of the cab, and then the cab driver, he just got pissed off, and he turned around and he was just shouting at me in French, like, and at that point I was like, oh my God, I have created this whole thing. I've created this. I need to like just get out of whatever this fug is right now. We got out of the taxi. We gave the guy money. He was really upset. Now I'm even more pissed off. I'm beginning to become aware of like, okay, I've brought something into this space here. We go into the metro. We try and get a metro ticket out. Yvonne just goes through. And what happens with my ticket? Of course, none of it works. None of it works.
Classic.
None of it works. It's all just sort of like, and eventually I had to like get off it with my own frustration and annoyance, and was like, I'm escalating this with my frustration. It's making me behave in a certain way. I'm giving off this energy. I'm now attracting, these kind of machines that don't work, or I'm not behaving properly. And I attracted the angriest cab driver in Paris.
In all of Paris.
And,
Maybe in the world.
Yeah. And we eventually, we got onto the metro. I just sat there and I was like, just let go of the anger and the frustration and the upset and whatever it is, because there's really nothing to be upset about at all. And because I started to become, concerned that I was going to attract something else that wouldn't be, it could, who knows how bad it could get, right?
Yeah.
It's just those sorts of things happen again and again and again. Like I take responsibility for it. Fortunately, I've calmed down and grew up, and it was okay, and we got there. And
yeah, thank goodness. Were you late?
Yes,
Okay.
we were late, but it was not a problem.
Okay. Yeah, that's funny you mentioned that. It reminds me of something that happened to me just last week as well. Sometimes it seems the whole forcing thing is easier to recognize than the non-forcing.
Mhm.
But I was at this seminar that I went to over the weekend. The invitation on the final day was to get a gift for our partner that had been with her throughout the seminar. And so I was trying to think about what I could get her. I dropped by Walmart, picked up something that I thought would be appropriate. And I'm basically running because I didn't have a lot of time. So I was like under really time crunch, and I had to pick up another lady and take her to the seminar as well. So I'm under quite a time crunch. And as I'm coming up to the checkout lines, I'm trying to navigate and choose which one I should go into. And there's one where there's a person in line. So I'm like, okay, sweet, I'll go behind that one. So I go in there, but they're just taking their time. So I look in to my left, and there's another checkout line there. So I go around to go in that checkout line, but by the time I get out of mine and go into, there's another guy has gotten in front of me, and he has like a large cart full of stuff. So I'm like, damn it. Okay, fine. So I go back to the other line I was in, but when I go back to the other line, there's another lady that had gotten in there as well. So I'm like, okay, cool. Well, at least this lady, she only has a few items of clothes. This should be fairly quick. And literally, I'm like minutes away from being late. So I'm like, okay, hurry. Let's go. I'm sitting there trying to calm myself down, because I do not want to be late to this event, because integrity is important at this event. You don't want to show up late. They'll close the doors. You won't get in on time. They will literally lock you out. So as I'm sitting there standing behind this lady, all of a sudden I can tell that the cashier is having trouble bringing up one of the items of clothing. And the lady who's purchasing the clothing is telling her, no, I think that's supposed to be $7. And the lady's trying to scan it, and it's not going through. And then she's sitting here trying to punch in the number, and it's not going through. And so then she gets on little intercom, and she's calling over a manager. And I'm like, bloody hell, you're just, and I said something along the lines of like, I think I swore something. I was like, I won't swear here on the podcast, but I was like, F it. I was like, how much does that thing cost to it? I will purchase it. I will purchase it per price. I don't care how much it costs. Just buy the damn dress. And then let's go. And so then the cashier, she rang it up, whatever. And it was not a big deal. And fortunately the ladies, after I had that little outburst, they're like, oh, we're so sorry, sir. I'm like, no, I get it. I completely understand. No big deal. Just I'm late. I just got to get out of here, and I'm happy to purchase the dress or whatever. But as I was walking away from there, made it there in time. But now when you're telling this story, Ryan, I'm looking back and I'm just reliving that experience of having this anxious need, which is one reason why I hate being late. I mean, anyone listening could probably, but doesn't that relate so well to the hustle and grind culture? Because oftentimes that same anxiousness of trying to, feeling like we have a deadline or trying to get something done is very similar to the way we can feel when we're in the hustle and grind culture, when we're getting up very early in the morning, when we are not sleeping well because of all the things that are churning back and forth in our mind.
There's so many kind of examples of this hustle and grind culture and the working hard or the being attached to something, and then how the attachment to the result or the attachment to something then produces activity which is ineffective.
Yeah.
And it's the kind we can see it in sports, right? Sports sports at a high level is a very good example of, the kind of the sports people that have the ability to not bring an enormous amount of significance to the moment when it's a kind of clutch moment of deciding a game. The idea of choking, right? And I can see this in
so
my own.
powerful.
I've used this example in golf many a time. Like, I've gone out and played golf. I haven't played for 6 months. I don't have any expectations. And I just go and I'm free and I'm flowing. And you have a game and you're like, well, I broke 90. That was amazing. Or broke 100 really. But that would be happy for me. But and then I'll have times where I've played, I've trained and I've done exercises and I've gone down the range and I've worked on certain things, and then I have now a different expectation and pressure put on myself, and I'm like, yeah, today is going to be the day I'm going to get my personal best. Today is the day that I'm going to break 90. Today is the day that I'm going to do this. And then of course there's just, tension in the body, and there's now like a kind of narrative that's happening. You get up in front of the tee and your brain's going, okay, put your foot there, put your leg there, do this, like barking instructions. And of course you're not present anymore, and you slice the ball and you're like, oh, that shouldn't have happened.
There you go. Yeah, you just miss it completely. Yep. Yep. Yeah, it reminds me of the best game of golf I ever played. I had that kind of laid back approach to it. I wasn't really attached. Also I did have a shot of bourbon, so that probably helped as well. Loosened me up a little bit. But it did, right? Because it gave me that more loose and flowy kind of experience. Now, there's one last story, and we'll end with this, right? So at the seminar that I went to, here's a lesson on leadership. There was a group of very accomplished people who were at this leadership seminar. And as part of the instruction that they were giving us, we had some different games that we were playing. And each of these games had a moral or a lesson that it was playing. And in one of the games, they split us up into 2 separate rooms. And we had a task to complete, and we were supposedly competing with each other to complete the task. And we needed to organize ourselves. So this is part of the game. And of course, they're going to be observing to see who speaks up, who doesn't speak, how does the leader take the role, what's the interaction. And this wonderful gentleman named Jonathan volunteered to be the leader. So he jumped immediately when they said, who wants to lead? And as I was watching him facilitate the group, I was just really impressed by the ease with which he led the group. He allowed people to talk that wanted to talk. He didn't shut anyone down. He didn't interrupt them. He seemed to be very comfortable doing it. Now, there was a part of the game where he was supposed to be keeping score on a whiteboard, and I noticed that it was difficult for him to do both. So I jumped up and I volunteered to help keep score. So I was keeping the score. He was facilitating the meeting, and everything was going smoothly. Afterwards, I was talking with him. I said, Jonathan, that was like, you are a natural leader. What do you do? And he said, I'm a CEO. So I said, well, you must be a good CEO because you actually have leadership skills. And he said, yes, but what I realized is that I should have delegated sooner someone to keep score with me. He said, I shouldn't have had to wait for you to jump up and to offer to help me. So what he said was basically, I'm still learning how to delegate and how to realize that I don't need to do everything myself.
Love it.
And for those of you who are listening here, the invitation we have is this. Whether you are currently working in a practice or maybe you're running a practice, where in your life and your career are you using an assertion-based approach? In other words, you're setting goals, you're trying to force your way to them. And where are you using more of an attraction-based energy, where you're setting the conditions and you're showing up in your life and your job with freedom and ease so that the right things can come your way? All right, and that's a wrap. Today's Smart Practice Tooltip, here we go. If you've ever felt you're drowning in spreadsheets when you should be designing masterpieces, well, this message is for you. On average, we found that many firm owners lose up to 10 hours weekly to admin tasks that could be delegated with the right system. This may be you, and that's why we've developed this delegation roadmap tool to help you escape from what we call admin hell, helping you reclaim your creative energy and passion for architecture. Go from chaos, cut through the chaos and go to calm. Cut through the chaos and harness your creativity. One architect who used this tool was able to clear 20 hours of low-value tasks from their weekly schedule. Now imagine what you could do with that time. Imagine what you could do. Now, it's possible that you already have all the time in the world and you have no need for 20 more hours, but if you think that might be useful for you, here's where to go next. Go to businessofarchitecture.com/delegate to download this smart practice tool 100% free for you. And now a word from our sponsors.
Today's episode is sponsored by Gelt. Is your architecture firm just filing taxes or actually using them to grow the business? Gelt is your partner in optimizing your taxes so you can focus on scale. They work with you year-round, not just at tax time, taking a proactive approach that combines expert CPAs and powerful technology, from smart entity structures to overlook deductions and smarter compensation planning. Gelt helps architecture firms unlock strategies most accountants miss. And exclusively for Business of Architecture listeners, Gelt is offering 10% off your first year. Don't wait for next tax season. Schedule your complimentary consultation at joingelt.com. That's JOINGELT.com to learn more and mention BOA when you sign up. A while ago, we began to hear reports of a company that was helping some of our clients build remote teams. We looked into it more closely and discovered the company World Teams that was helping small architectural practitioners build remote teams that were both capable and qualified. We were intrigued by another business that are addressing one of the critical pain points for small architectural practices, which is the ability to grow and shrink a team effectively, to be able to handle higher workflow without having to staff up significantly, and also being very sensitive about labor cost. World Teams is built to address these issues. World Teams is a small but mighty company that helps architectural practices build high-performing remote teams quickly and efficiently, saving you the headache of sorting resumes and interviewing underqualified candidates. World Teams operates in your time zone and prioritizes near-native English speakers, ensuring clear and efficient communication with your remote team members. They have flexible contracts so you can adjust your team size as your needs evolve. Additionally, you're connected directly with your skilled professionals, which fosters trust and collaboration, and World Teams helps you reduce your operating cost without compromising the quality that's so important to a practice. To download a free guide for building a remote team for a small architectural practice, go to businessofarchitecture.com/World Teams. That's one word, businessofarchitecture.com/World Teams. As a reminder, sponsorship is not an endorsement, and you must do your own due diligence before entering into any business relationship. Go to businessofarchitecture.com/World Teams.
Hey, a special shout out. Thanks to those of you who left reviews on iTunes. It always helps people find this amazing content, inspires Ryan and myself to continue to produce information that can help you in your journey as an architect. To be acknowledged on the show, here's what to do. Open up the podcast app on your iPhone. This only works for iPhone. Sorry, Android users. Search for Business of Architecture, and after clicking on the show, scroll all the way to the bottom to leave a review. As always, today's episode of the Business of Architecture show is sponsored by Smart Practice, our proprietary method for running an architectural practice. You can cut through the chaos and get back to creativity again. Because you see, it likely isn't your architectural skills that hold you back. It's the business aspects of running a practice, managing projects and people, chasing invoices, contractors, and dealing with money. So if you've had enough of the hustle and grind, if you feel like you're ready to graduate from being a glorified administrator and get back to architecture again, what are you waiting for? Go to smartpracticemethod.com. I have a special training video that I prepared specifically for podcast listeners. You can get access to that on that page. And with that, I want to thank you for joining us today here on the show and remind you that the views expressed on this show by our guest do not represent those of the host, and we make no representation, promise, guarantee, pledge, contract, warranty, bond, or commitment except to help you live your best life and do your best work. Carpe diem.